Well, hello everyone. It's Christy. Welcome to an event that didn't exist about 7 hours ago. But as social media went on the bank holiday in Britain and the day off in Germany, I don't know what's called here, a conversation happened that ended up in this. And with me talking to Cog, who you guys might know from Kevin's channel. Do you want to say a little bit first before we start about your channel and also your recent video?
Oh, that's very kind of you to let me take the lead for a second. I mean, the most recent video I did was just a sort of base response to Peterson on some of the Marx stuff that he was coming out with in his opening statement. Now, I judge debates at the university on that. I run a debating society, so I was kind of placed to, when the opening statement started, I was kind of placed already to go, okay, so this is wrong, this doesn't work, that sort of thing. And I was sort of expecting Žižek to come along those lines. So when he didn't, I felt like I had to put a response in. And I guess that's my kind of thing. I'm just in terms of my actual channel, I'm just your average sort of leftist YouTuber, I guess.
Yeah, left
Yeah.
YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you identify as a Marxist? It sounded like that from your video, but I wanted to.
So it's an interesting thing because analytically, yes, in the way that I analyze capitalism, yes.
Okay.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that I would advocate for everything and all things Marxist, if that makes sense.
Right. So you're using you apply the theoretical framework for
Yes.
as a mode of analysis.
Yeah.
Rather than an ideology that you espouse actively as a political solution.
Yes. Although I have been known to hang out with Marxists, but then again, so have you and
yes,
Kev, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they're fine. It's fine, yeah. But this just goes to the point that, it seems to be a misperception in some of Peterson's audience that if you understand Marx, you are a Marxist.
Yeah, and it leads to this sort of perception of universities as indoctrinating people into Marxism.
Yeah.
When it's actually just, if you're, according to these people, if you are a Marxist, it's just somebody who talks about Marx or who has some understanding of Marx. It's a really bizarre thing, yeah.
And maybe it just shows even the understanding Marx critique they find a threat,
Yes.
Which means it's a very powerful idea if it makes so many people nervous. Anyway, and they also say free speech at the same time that they want to deny academic freedom.
Let's not forget the old Sargon petition.
Yes.
And social justice courses to universities.
Buildings, vague buildings somewhere. We'll get this message. Right. So what we were talking about on Twitter earlier, Cog and I were in a conversation, disagreement, shall we say, with somebody on Twitter. And I started rewatching parts of this, and I had watched your video as well, which I found really, really helpful. But one of the things that I noticed, because I had started with the Žižek, I skipped the Peterson and I went right to the Žižek. And listening to the Žižek, I was struggling. I was pausing to live tweet it because his content is so dense. And then I watched your bit with Peterson in it. And I was just kept waiting for Peterson to get to the point. And I realized how just the experience of listening to both men was so profoundly different. That Peterson uses so many of these sort of filler words and vague just repetitions of things. He doesn't make really good use of their time, and I didn't really know how to express that. So I thought, I'll drag you along, Cog. And we'll watch it together and just look at the first 10 minutes of each man's statement, because each of them, in their opening statement, the first 10 minutes should kind of lay out some of the main ideas they have, and what do they do with their language is my question. Not so much understanding and unpacking, although we can do that a little bit too, but really looking more at how they've used their verbal time, or the time they have to explain the ideas in their head and make their case. But before we do that, we have I have to share my screen now because we're starting to get to the good stuff. During the course of the conversation on Twitter, I was searching around for things about Peterson or whatever, and I saw this and shared it. I don't know if you'd seen it earlier because it's got a lot of views, but it's Jordan Peterson talking about how he was going to prepare for his debate with Žižek. I need to move my mic a little bit closer to my speaker. I'm going to mute myself while I do. yeah, we're just going to watch Jordan Peterson, and then Cog, I'll let you react first. So,
how have I prepared for my debate with Žižek? What are your goals for the conversation to be productive? Well, I haven't prepared enough, but I've got tomorrow, and you can do a lot with one day.
Sorry. I have to stop it. Is it a point?
It is like something out of a self-help book almost immediately. Something which isn't really very helpful. Before we went live, I compared it to a student, a couple of hours before the seminar going, well, I can do the reading in the 10 minutes before we get into the seminar.
Really? And the other thing is that I thought about a little bit later during the dispute on Twitter was how much were people paying to see him do this debate? And he's basically cramming for it the night before. But okay, let's see what his methods, because maybe he's just going to really hit the books. He's going to get some a big stack of things to read and really speed read through it. Let's see what his plans are.
I want to review some more of Žižek's YouTube videos.
Masterful.
Oh God.
I'm gonna get right on that academic train of skimming through YouTube videos.
He could have saved himself by saying something along the lines of, well, I'm going to read some academic book reviews of Žižek's work or something like that. He didn't even have to be honest. He could have said that, but instead he went, no, YouTube videos.
Just like it's like if that was where he was going to start, maybe to get a feel for things or find something recent, whatever. But he's just like, I'm going to look at YouTube videos. So, all right.
I want to go through a couple of his books.
Okay, there we go. There's the book.
I've got some good lists of what seems central. But what I've done so far, I really have 25 minutes to make my case. The rest of it's discussion and Q&A.
So he's very aware of his time limit. I'm just going to point that out. He's got 25 minutes to make his case.
Not too worried about that because it's easier for me to answer on the fly than to deliver a prepared argument.
Not really. I just want to say, he doesn't seem to do too well with that. So,
there's something more involuntary about it, something more habitual. Anyways, I don't know the reasons precisely, but it's definitely easier. I've got 25 minutes to make my case. And the way I prepared for that was that I reread the Communist Manifesto and thought it through. And
that's it.
And he thought it through. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad he said the bit about thinking it through. Sorry, it's just it's like I think this every time I listen to Peterson. It's like you get Smash, the watery mashed potato stuff.
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah, it's like that. It's not quite. There's no substance there, and for some reason he also reminds me of some kind of like a shadow or something. I don't know. Maybe that's just me being mean, but yeah.
Also, I have to say that by the time you get to the Q&A, the way that Peterson is utterly baffled at Žižek's positions on pretty much everything, it doesn't seem like he really got through the books.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. He might have had the aspiration of getting through some books, but I don't actually think he did that. And yeah, he got the Communist Manifesto out, set it down, and then he just crossed his arms and thought about it for a while. So let's hear what the deep thoughts of Jordan Peterson on the Communist Manifesto were.
I've identified what I think the fundamental, every philosophical treatise or every treatise that purports to be philosophical is predicated on a set of assumptions or axioms.
Except it's a manifesto. It's not a treatise. Is there a difference? I think there's a difference between a political manifesto and a work of, a treatise on understanding. I don't know what your opinion is on that, Cog.
Yeah, I think that actually, I think he's probably gone to the wrong place. It's because the Communist Manifesto is so short. When you're doing an introductory course, like he probably did when he was at university in the 70s, like when you're doing an introductory course, they give you They say, oh, read the Communist Manifesto because it's a short works, and it's something that you can, if you've completely forgotten to do the reading, you can do it overnight. And that's why it's often recommended. But something like Das Kapital gives you a much better understanding.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
I did hear a story, I don't know where now, and I can't find it anywhere, so it must have been apocryphal, about Karl Marx really having a hard time getting started writing, and his editors having given him a large advance on, I think it was Das Kapital, or really harassing him. And as the due date for the book came around, the publishers received a letter from Marx saying, "Gentlemen, I have some excellent news. I have begun to write."
Yes. Well, Peterson's taken a leaf out of his book there, really. I mean,
yeah, I think that was pretty much. Oh, yeah. Oops, sorry. Yeah, some of the axioms that he found in the manifesto. So we'll hear those, and then we'll get on to the debate.
Undeclared articles of faith of the statement, and so I've tried to identify what those are. Some of them, anyways. I won't have time to cover all of them. So I've identified, let's say, 5. It's going to be somewhere between 5 and 10. And then I've thought through whether or not they were credible as axioms. And
more thinking. There's a lot of thinking that Jordan does.
Yeah.
Not a lot of reading.
Yes. He does a lot of thinking things through. It also occurs to me that he's completely let go of the idea that social scientists like you have a good understanding of, and that's that we view the world in different frameworks, and sometimes we have to shift out our framework in order to understand another person's perspective on something.
Yeah.
He just seems to have let go of that into there's some assumptions that everybody makes, and all ideas are wrong, but I hate postmodernism.
As it's fine. As I pointed out on Twitter, he would have gotten more out of reading A Very Short Introduction. That's a book series put out by Oxford University Press. That one on Marx, the Very Short Introduction on Marx, because it's more complete and includes all the major concepts. He would have been better off with that than just sitting down with a Communist Manifesto and then trying to work out some axioms and decide whether or not he thought they were valid. But yeah. I'm just gonna say I'm not impressed.
Yeah. It's to say nothing about Jordan Peterson's like intelligence necessarily, because if I sat down and only read the Communist Manifesto, I'd only know that much about it. But it's just like pure laziness, especially in the face of what he's getting paid. You know?
Absolutely, and the fact that he's been criticizing, Marxism and Marxist thought and what Marxist ideas were being taught at universities for how long now, and he's never properly understood it this entire time, because this is his first acquaintance with Marx directly.
Yeah, since he was 18, which is I mean, I don't want to guess at how old he is, but it seems like a while ago.
Yes, and also probably in the middle of or shortly after the Red Scare, when anti-communism was the framework with which these things were sort of taught, at least in the United States. I don't know if that spread really, the anti-communism, to Canada, but anyway. And also, too, just there are so many books out there on Marxist theory. Are you kidding me? Just go to, just go to Amazon and do Marx or Reader or Understanding Marx. It would just be, ugh. All right, I think we're almost done with his preparation, so we'll just finish this off and see. Did he pause? Or is he thinking?
I don't believe that. I don't think I discovered a single axiom in the Communist Manifesto that was credible. What I discovered instead, I think, is that tract was written by 2 people who could think, but who couldn't think about what they were thinking, because the propositions that they put forward are so uncritically accepted by the writers of the tract that it's actually a kind of miracle. I'll just give you one example, and I will bring this up tomorrow in the debate. Marx and Engels, because Engels also helped write the Communist Manifesto, appeared to presume that, and also to hope for, and to wish for, and to work in a revolutionary manner towards ensuring that private property would be abolished, and that the means of production so the entire economy in some sense would be held by the dictatorship of the proletariat. And that would be a consequence of the working class seizing control. But there's no real development of that as an idea. It's like, well, seizing control, how? And who? Like, and just because, is it really the case that just because it's members of the working class that have now seized control of the means of production, that they're going to be benevolent in a way that the capitalists weren't? I mean, that seems to be psychologically naive beyond even the capacity of Marx.
He's really asking the wrong questions about Marx, you know? And also, you know, yeah, this is so simple. It's if only Marx had written out his theory, you know, the more complicated version of it in other books.
I know, yeah. If only he'd written a book on capital called Das Kapital or something. Yeah, it's incredible the way he kind of, he's very dismissive of Marx as well. Like, Marx is one of the great thinkers of history, really, and one of the great thinkers of Western philosophy, which he doesn't really like to consider. He likes to create this narrative of kind of the West versus Marxism and postmodern neo-Marxism. But, you know, Marx is a part of the West. I just did want to say that his definition of an axiom seems to be something that's taken on belief. Yes,
that was also a weird comment, as opposed to a fundamental principle upon which other things rest. Yeah.
Yeah, but then he sort of questions. He says something along the lines of just then that he found no credible axioms. Well, if your definition of an axiom is it has to be taken on belief, how are you going to determine its credibility? I just couldn't see what he was driving at.
Excellent. No, excellent point in terms of comparing apples to oranges, beliefs and credibility, right? Yeah, nicely spotted. Okay, so, right, I think that's enough, Peterson, in that situation. Shall we get on with the debate?
Is no an option? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
We're in this together. Come on, you agree.
Oh, God. Okay.
Now, I'm interested. You said that you judge debate, which I didn't know until you said it at the start of the video. And so tell me what you look for. Like, give a little breakdown of what you look for when people do these sorts of debates or public speaking things.
Well, I mean, it depends on the style of debate that you're using. But in British parliamentary style, from the opening speaker, you'd be looking ideally for an opening speaker who sets out their thesis, if you like. But in British parliamentary style, we usually give them a statement. Is a little bit different in that way, in that they had a very sort of open-ended thesis to work with. I think that it was happiness, communism, and capitalism, or Marxism and capitalism, was it?
Too vague.
Yeah, it was very vague. But whereas in an actual like formal university debate, what we get given is a statement like, this house believes that Marxism is better for happiness than communism, or something like that. Sorry, than capitalism. And so we then get asked to judge them on their how well they set out and define those terms. So you define what you meant by Marxism, you define what you meant by happiness, you'd explain, and also the second speaker has a duty to connect the two paths together, the two speeches together. The first speaker is very much about definitions and making sure that all the points connect together into a flowing argument that makes sense.
Okay, great, because that's what I do just from academic training. And so in terms of like, that's what I look for, because in all honesty, that's what you do in a good article as well. You lay out your points, you define your definitions, and then you go on to make your argument and you present your evidence. And, you know, so the point of this is not so much, as I said, to get in and question whether or not they're right about what they say, so much as how they're communicating it and whether or not they're using their language efficiently. What I'm going to guess, so what I'm predicting, based on my little bit of experience, is that Žižek is going to make at least twice as many points in the same amount of time as Jordan Peterson is. And that's what we're looking at. It's very weird. It's very social sciencey. It's discourse analysis. It's a linguistic analysis, not so much political analysis, although we might get dragged into it. And if there are points of correction on marks that need to be brought up, Cog, I'll rely on you to do that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and lock the screen on myself at this point. So when people, just pipe up at any time. Just be like Kevin and say something. Blurt out something.
I could never claim to imitate Kevin, of course. Are you going to like pause it every 2 minutes? Is that the way you want to operate?
Yeah, I guess what I'll do is I'll wait for Peterson to say something that I think is, I can restate it as a point. So I'm going to kind of play it by ear a little bit. And we're going to go through it slowly to see if he's connecting ideas as opposed to responding and reacting. Just sort of like, I think he's saying this, I think he's saying that kind of thing. So I can take the lead, and then maybe as we go, because we're kind of making this up as we go, you can just start to jump in as you feel comfortable.
That's good.
All right. Here we go. I don't want to get done for like copyright, so theater mode.
Well, thank you for that insanely enthusiastic welcome for the entire event. And
all right, so we're at 7:40. We'll go to 17:40, or we'll let him finish his statement, obviously, unless it's like a 2-minute sentence.
And also for being here, I have to tell you first that this event, and I suppose my life in some sense, hit a new milestone that I was just made aware of by a stagehand today backstage, who informed me that last week the tickets for this event were being scalped online at a higher price than the tickets for the Leafs playoff games.
Those people got ripped off.
Yeah.
This was, neither of these guys are the sort of next Christopher Hitchens. This was, I thought Tony Blair versus Hitchens was more exciting than this, TBH. So, all right. I guess he's using his time to kind of, promote himself, but we'll just hit play.
So I don't know what to make of that. All right. So how did I prepare for this? I familiarized myself to the degree that it was possible with Slavoj Žižek's work, and that wasn't that possible because he has a lot of work and he's a very original thinker, and this debate was put together in relatively short order.
All right, can we just make a note that he's told 2 stories now?
Yeah, although it's a good method of opening a debate to start with a question. That's something I generally kind of go. You got to bear in mind I do judge undergraduates, so I'm expecting a bit of a higher standard from Peterson, but it's not a bad way to open a debate.
Yeah, I kind of wish he would restate maybe he will, but I'm kind of waiting for him to restate the question so I can understand his framing of it. That's one of the things that I'm looking for. So I actually haven't watched the Peterson start. This is my first response to it. So we're doing a live reaction from me, but that's what I'm waiting for, as you said, to lay out his thesis and his definition. So.
And what I did instead was return to what I regarded as the original cause of all the trouble, let's say, which was the Communist Manifesto. And what I attempted to do, because that's Marx, and we're here to talk about Marxism, let's say. And what I tried to do was read it. And to read something, you don't just follow the words and follow the meaning, but you take apart the sentences and you ask yourself at this level of phrase and at the level of sentence and at the level of paragraph, is this true? Are there counter arguments that can be put forward that are credible? Is this solid thinking?
All right. Can we make a note? He's doing another, I guess, story/advice on how to read something. I mean, this is what he's spending his time talking about. So we need to make a note. I think in fairness, we need to code it, as it were. We haven't really got to the substance of any of the topics yet, but he is doing things with his time. So we have to account for it, I think.
Also,
do you have any?
I was going to say, just analyzing things at the level of paragraph and at the level of sentence is just like, what? You're just filling it with, I mean, obviously it's important to analyze each sentence as a sentence and each sentence as a paragraph, but most people don't feel the need to lay that out, and they probably presume that somebody who has a doctorate does that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. First, you should just read through and see if you understand what they're saying. And I remember the advice I read in, I think it was it The History of Philosophy by Bertrand Russell, about, you read someone first to understand them. You don't have to agree with them, but you want to make sure you accurately understand them. Because if you don't accurately understand them, you can't properly critique them. So the first step is understanding. And yeah, you can do that, but we saw from Peterson's read that's yeah, I don't think he went for understanding in this case. Anyway, we're off on a tangent. All right, I'm going to hit play.
And I have to tell you, and I'm not trying to be flippant here, that I have rarely read a tract. Now, I read it when I was 18. It was a long time ago. Like that's 40 years ago. I've rarely read a tract that made as many errors per sentence, conceptual errors per sentence, as the Communist Manifesto. It was quite a miraculous reread.
All right, so I guess that one point here, the Communist Manifesto has a lot of errors in it. That seems to me like his first point of substance to deal with the topic.
Yeah, it's also very general. Like, I don't know that a lot of people would necessarily agree or even to disagree with that. It's quite difficult because he hasn't given anything. He's just issued a general statement and kind of let his supporters in the audience think of things in the Communist Manifesto, like dictatorship of the proletariat, that they kind of disagree with.
Mm-hmm. Fill in the blanks.
Yeah, fill in the blanks. Yeah.
Right. Yes, vague language, but okay, noted.
It was interesting to think about it psychologically as well, because I've read student papers that were of the same ilk in some sense, although I'm not suggesting that they were of the same level of glittering literary brilliance and polemic quality. And I also understand that the Communist Manifesto was a call for revolution and not a standard logical argument. But that notwithstanding, I have some things to say about the authors psychologically.
Okay. Well, there's actually a couple points to unpack there. Do you want to go with what you've heard him say? The sound is okay on your end too, right? I assumed you would have asked me to turn it up if it was a problem.
Yeah, it's all good. I can
okay.
hear you okay. Yeah. I mean to analyze it psychologically, I guess he's pulling it into his field, but then he doesn't. It's I don't know. I didn't take it as a psychological analysis. I'm not a psychologist, so I can't really comment. I can do history and politics because they're the two areas which I know. But I can't tell how what he's said or about to say is really. He brings up Jung, but I can't tell how that's analyzing it psychologically.
Yeah, it seems to me that his arc was, I've read student essays that are better, even though there's some sort of literary brilliance, did he say, to it, and then he was going to look at it from a psychological angle. That to me seems a very odd way to approach Marx. I don't know how you read the Communist Manifesto and then think you can have a psychological take on the work of two men combined, as if it was one mind. I'm just going to raise that question methodologically.
Yeah, I mean it's a bit of a difficult area for us because I mean I don't have any background in psychology, so I can't tell if that's possible or even a thing. But what I can sort of say is that Marx and Engels would not have got to the sort of level of respect that they have in the academic community today if they were just sort of student level. It just wouldn't happen.
No. It wouldn't have had that much of an impact on thought, and to the point where, it does. You can't talk about capitalism without bringing in Marxist terminology and critique to it.
Mm-hmm.
They're just so intertwined at this point. Also, he hasn't, I'm just going to point this out, really talked about happiness or capital or communism, or how all these things are going to come together, or even what his main point is. And we are 3 minutes in now, or almost 3 minutes in. So at this point, to me, he's just waffling. And you probably recognize this piece of advice that when you go to write, when you go in the British system, when they have SAT exams, and you have to sit in a room at a desk for 3 hours with a piece of paper, and you have to answer 3 questions. You have an hour basically to answer each question. And the advice that we give students, because they don't know what the questions are going to be before they get into the room, They just get a list of 10 questions, and then they can pick from amongst those, they get to pick 3. And when we say, how do you do this? How do you go about answering, getting a good mark in an essay? First is answer the question. Second is answer the question. Third is answer the question. But if you can't answer the question, the next tactic is redefine the question into something that you can answer. You say, oh, well, the issue here isn't really about capitalism and happiness. It's really about the Communist Manifesto because, and the third thing is just to waffle on. And at this point, he's waffling on to me.
Yeah. I thought you were going to go down the level that they teach GCSE students of just sort of point, evidence, explain, as kind of just a way to structure so that you're making a point and you're picking up a mark in every sort of minute of the exam. Which even if he'd done that, he'd probably be a little bit better off at this point. Yeah.
Okay. All right. It's going to hit play here again. Thanks, by the way. I think this is working out well. What do you think?
Yeah. How long? Sorry, I lost track of where we got to. Was that about 2 minutes?
We're at 10:10, and we're going to 17:40.
40. Okay.
So that's what we've got. We're not going to get through Žižek this fast, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
So, all right, hitting play.
First thing is that it doesn't seem to me that either Marx or Engels grappled with this particular fundamental truth, which is that almost all ideas are wrong. And so and it doesn't matter if they're your ideas or someone else's ideas, they're probably wrong. And even if they strike you with the force of brilliance, your job is to assume, first of all, that they're probably wrong.
Okay, point. All ideas are wrong. I don't know where this is going.
I mean, this is from the great critic of postmodernism, or neo-Marxist postmodernism, which is just what?
Good point. You what, mate?
Yeah, all ideas are wrong. It's just like after you've said that, you really can't. If one of my sort of debaters had said that in a debate, I'd be marking on my bit of paper and going, so where are you going to go from here? You can't really, once you've admitted that all ideas are wrong, and that's the sort of base you're going from, where are you going to go? Now, where is your argument going to take you? I don't know.
Hey, strap in. Let's see where this ride goes.
And then to assault them with everything you have in your arsenal and see if they can survive. And what struck me about the Communist Manifesto was...
All right, so he's trying to do I guess he's trying to pull a Descartes? A sort of weird Descartes move? About how Descartes stripped everything down to, I know that I'm thinking.
I think that, I think that therefore I am. I guess that's what he's trying to do, but it's
so bad because if you're emotionally predisposed to something, assaulting it with bad idea, like not very strong counter arguments, you won't move yourself.
Yeah, and does he apply this logic to capitalism? Like, is this something where he takes capitalism and he goes, "This is how capitalism works. Now I'm going to assault it with everything I've got." Don't tell me that Jordan Peterson does that, because he doesn't. It's just Now
remember, this is the thread that we're working back from is that this is a psychological analysis, the Communist Manifesto. Remember, that's where we were 3 steps ago, according to my mental notes. I still have no idea where we're going down this road, but let's hit play.
It was akin to something Jung said about typical thinking, and this was the thinking of people who weren't trained to think. He said that the typical thinker has a thought. It appears to them like an object might appear in a room. The thought appears, and then they just accept it as true. They don't go the second step, which is to think about the thinking. And that's the real essence of critical thinking. It's
just not... Sorry, you're not actually saying anything.
No, he's not saying anything. This is... Yeah, you're right.
Sorry. I've started laughing now and I can't stop. But it's just amazing that he's considered so strongly by thinkers on the right, but he's not actually saying anything.
This is what I'm saying about these vacuous filler words. I just keep waiting for him to get to the point.
I'm going to think about thinking. Like, be self-critical. That's a good move. But thinking about thinking is not really saying anything. I mean, I guess that's kind of what philosophy is, but then you have to engage with some of the philosophy. You can't just skim read the author's like most famous and basic work.
And also, when you say think about thinking, there's literally I can think of numerous perspectives from which you could reflect on your own thinking, from a Freudian perspective, from a capitalist perspective, from a social. Like, it's not like thinking about thinking is the clear thing in and of itself. You need a reflective paradigm, and then you have to pick what. So anyway, this is like him going, you got to take things apart and look at it without really explaining other than taking it apart and looking at it why. But yeah, I just had to. That was amazing. Like, just the vacuousness of that. But let's get back to it.
People in university is to read a text and to think about it critically, not to destroy the utility of the text, but to separate the wheat from the chaff. And so what I tried to do when I was reading the Communist Manifesto was to separate the wheat from the chaff. And I'm afraid I found some wheat, yeah.
But when you do critical theory, when you're doing a critical reading, you use a theoretical framework. I mean, you have the ones I'm familiar with, like a Marxist framework or a feminist framework or something else. It's not just like I'm sitting down to criticize something. You're usually looking at power relations or some other sort of, social structures embedded in the thing you're looking at. But just a little point there. Okay, yeah, I just see you nodding, so I'll hit play.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Oh, by the way, did he make a point here that we need to note down? I want to make sure we get his content down. I've already forgotten what he said.
It's more. He was on about thinking about thinking, separating the wheat from the chaff.
Okay, he's just repeating himself. Okay, right.
Yeah.
Yes, but mostly chaff, and I'm going to explain why. Hopefully, in relatively short order. So I'm going to outline 10 of the fundamental axioms of the Communist Manifesto. And so these are truths that are basically held as self-evident by the authors. And they're truths that are presented in some sense as unquestioned. And I'm going to question them and tell you why I think they're unreliable. Now, we should remember that this tract was actually written 170 years ago.
Yeah, you'd think that maybe somebody else had written something on it you might want to read between now.
Oh my God.
I'm the first person in the world to have ever done this. Clearly, no one ever has even thought about whether or not there are axioms in here. So let me just ignore 100 years of writing.
I know. He also he says I'm going to lay out 10 points. Now, when somebody does that in a debate, I love it because I'm like, oh yes, that means that all the judges can clearly follow an argument, and we're more likely to come to a consensus with the wings who operate alongside the judges and sort of help them make a decision.
Okay.
And that's usually a really good thing. But he lays out his first, and then he doesn't tell you where the rest of them come in. So you might as well, yeah.
And remember, we're still doing a psychoanalysis of the Communist Manifesto. Even though he's not connected how this is psychological, he's now changed it to being a critique of an axiomatic principles he found in the book. This is a mess. He still hasn't mentioned either happiness or capitalism. Okay, hitting play.
That's a long time ago. And we have learned a fair bit since then about human nature, about society, about politics, about economics. There's lots of mysteries left to be solved, but
point. We've learned lots of things.
It's his thinking about thinking thing again.
Well, the result of thinking about thinking. So
yes, smashed potatoes again. Yeah. Oh God.
We are slightly wiser, I presume, than we were at one point. You can forgive the authors to some degree for what they didn't know, but that doesn't matter, given that the essence of this doctrine is still held as sacrosanct by a large proportion of academics. Probably are among the most, what would you call, guilty of that particular.
What the hell?
I know. Also, sacrosanct. Sacrosanct. I just, oh my God. It's just like, I did check for the video, the definition of sacrosanct, not sacrosanct, because sacrosanct isn't a thing. Sacrosanct, and it literally comes up as too valuable to be interfered with. But I can't think of a doctrine that's more, or can barely think of a doctrine that's more interfered with.
Yeah.
You know, and blended with other ideas constantly. You know.
Absolutely, because Marx's observations or reflections back to the society of what capitalism was doing in industrial Britain and around Europe was accurate. He gave us a language to talk about those things that actually he gave us a language to talk about feudal relations in a way that we couldn't before. And previous, historical materialism and all that kind of framing. So yeah, I don't want to go on try not to go on too much of a rant. Sorry. All right, hitting play. Oh, did he have a point there? Academics are all Marxists, I guess, is his point in that one. We're at 12:45, so we've got 5 more minutes.
Sin. So here's proposition number 1. History is to be viewed primarily as an economic class struggle. All right, so let's think about that for a minute. First of all, the proposition there is that history is primarily to be viewed through an economic lens, and I think that's a debatable proposition because
oh God, this is like political theory 101 freshman with a Republican, college Republican sitting in the back going, oh, why is he assuming that? Like, oh, just
yeah. It's also dialectical materialism isn't necessarily saying. Sorry, I don't know if he said this yet, but it's in my notes. But it isn't necessarily saying that everything has to be viewed through an economic lens. It's not like that sort of. I can't think of the word. I want to say primary, but sort of pushed to the front. It's not quite like that.
No, I mean, it's not like, the guy in Greece who realized that you could weigh gold by throwing it in water and measuring displacement, in Eureka. It's not like Marx ran down the street saying, Eureka, Eureka, I have the one worldview we can all use now.
Yes, exactly.
It wasn't like we were liberated from the burden of having, different opinions or different perspectives. So, straw manning Marx, I guess, is the point.
There are many other motivations that drive human beings than economics, and those have to be taken into account, especially that drive people other than economic competition, like economic cooperation, for example. And so that's a problem. The other problem is that it's actually not nearly a pessimistic enough description of the actual problem, because history, this is to give the devil his due. The idea that one of the driving forces between history is hierarchical struggle.
All right, so Marxism isn't pessimistic enough. Is a point I'd note, because now we're going to transition into hierarchies, and I'm going to guess this is where he gets on a bit of a hobby horse.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember the bit from my video, but I am going to remind you of that. When he said that Marxism isn't pessimistic enough in a second. Because I think it'll be interesting to raise that again.
Yes, I did enjoy seeing the live version of the Peterson fumbling bit that you had in your video.
Oh, yes, with the
probably. I don't know. I'm talking out of my ass here. All right.
It's absolutely true, but the idea that that's actually history is not true, because it's deeper than history. It's biology itself, because organisms of all sorts organize themselves into hierarchies. And one of the problems with hierarchies is that they tend to arrange themselves into a winner-take-all situation. And so, that is implicit in some sense in Marx's thinking, because of course Marx believed that in a capitalist society, capital would accumulate in the hands of fewer and fewer people. And that actually is in keeping with the nature of hierarchical organizations. Now, the problem with that isn't so much the fact of, so there's accuracy in the accusation that is a eternal form of motivation for struggle.
All right, so I'm trying to get through this Is he now saying that Marx is right? that the sort of the way that the hierarchy of capitalism work actually maps onto Jordan Peterson's notion of hierarchies as well, or is that not?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of how I read it. I accused him of naturalistic fallacy at this point, and a lot of people in the comments and that guy on Twitter who was like the knight from Monty Python, he was just give up. And it was just like, you chopped him to bits, and he was still insisting that he is only a flesh wound, and it was quite funny to be a part of that. But I got lost on a tangent there. But he said that the naturalistic fallacy didn't apply because Peterson isn't saying that this is necessarily how it should be. He's just stating that this is how it is. But actually, in some ways, he is also stating that this is how it should be, because remember that this is a guy defending capitalism. So he is stating that because animals have hierarchies, it's just natural that humans have hierarchies, and therefore all hierarchies are just. You could use it to defend any hierarchy,
Yep. So that's that was that point. And we'll see where he wanders into now.
But it's an underestimation of the seriousness of the problem.
Okay, but the problem with Marx is it's an underestimation of the seriousness of the problem?
I just you just can't take something that he says and then put it together with something else that he said and have the two statements make sense together.
I'm sorry. We tried to follow a train of thought here. I'll hit play.
Because it attributes it to the structure of human societies rather than the deeper reality of the existence of hierarchical structures per se, which, as they also characterize the animal kingdom to a large degree, are clearly not only human constructions. And
wait, is he saying if only Marx would have realized that hierarchies is the natural way human societies would be ordered, he wouldn't have needed to rewrite the Communist Manifesto, because he would have realized it's pointless to try to make societies equal or people equal? Because he equates it with egalitarianism?
Yeah, this is what I mean by naturalistic fallacy.
Yep. Pretty much. You just realized we're meant to be in hierarchies. You wouldn't have wasted all of our time, Marx, with your critique of how people's labor is, sold at less than it's actually worth.
Damn Marx and his postmodernism.
Yes, that great postmodernist. Yes. Marx. But this grand narrative that's always, I don't know. All right, hold on.
And the idea that there's hierarchical competition among human beings, there's evidence for that goes back at least to the Paleolithic times. And so that's the...
I want to also just, note that Žižek does a really good job of specifying when he quotes someone and specific books in the years. And other than the Communist Manifesto, I can't think of a single source that Peterson puts out there in your video or what I've seen so far to sort of substantiate any of his empirical assertions.
Yeah.
So, all right. Just wanted to note that. Thanks.
The next problem is that, this ancient problem of hierarchical structure is clearly not attributable to capitalism, because it existed long in human history before capitalism existed, and then it predated human history itself. So the question then arises, why would you necessarily, at least implicitly, link the class struggle with capitalism, given that it's a far deeper problem? And now,
all right, so he just repeated what I said before, right? About capitalism is actually just based on a structure that's deeper, and okay. All right, he just repeated the same thing. Okay. Oh, we only have 2 minutes left. Hurrah. It's so painful, but we're almost through it. All right.
Now, it's also, you've got to understand that this is a deeper problem for people on the left, not just for people on the right. It is the case that hierarchical structures dispossess those people who are at the bottom, those creatures who are at the bottom, speaking, say, of animals, but those people who are at the bottom, and that is a fundamental existential problem. But the other thing that Marx didn't seem...
Is it an existential problem or a structural problem?
Yeah, I don't know how, it seems to be a very right-wing perspective to sort of shift it to existentialism when something that you don't like comes up, something reality that you don't like comes up,
Oh. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, that was it. I was trying to think of an example, but then I couldn't.
I got it. Yeah, which is
Yeah.
as if going, look at all this human suffering caused in some cases directly by other human beings. Oh, if only there was something we could do about it, but we can't because it's existential.
Yeah.
It's just like death. There's nothing we can do about it. It's a crisis because we can't. No, it's structural.
Yeah.
It's about structure and power. That's it. And they're human constructs, but you know that. Get it.
To take into account is that there are far more reasons that human beings struggle than their economic class struggle, even if you build the hierarchical idea into that, which is a more
repeating himself again
comprehensive way of thinking about it. Human beings struggle with themselves, with the malevolence that's inside themselves, with the evil that they're capable of doing, with the spiritual and psychological warfare that goes on within them. And we're also actually always at odds with nature.
Is he doing a song and dance show? I just feel like da-da-da, 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 da-da-da.
I just can't believe where he's gone with this. It seems really strange. Also, the thought that Marx would have been like, "Oh, nature! That I knew I left something out of my work." Oh, just
wait. I want to see if I can kind of do a little musical scat background here. This little bit he does here. Hopefully, it didn't go too far back, but
is clearly not attributable to capitalism because it existed long in human history before capitalism existed, and then it predated human history itself. So the question then arises, why would you necessarily, at least implicitly, link the class struggle with capitalism, given that it's a far deeper problem? And now it's also, you've got to understand that this is a deeper problem for people on the left, not just for people on the right. It is the case that hierarchical structures dispossess those people
I went
who are
too
at
far
the bottom,
back.
those creatures who are at the
Darn it.
bottom.
Sorry,
Speaking,
everyone.
say, of animals, but those people who are at the bottom, and that is a fundamental existential problem. But the other thing that Marx didn't seem to take into account is that there are far more reasons that human beings struggle than their economic class struggle, even if you build the hierarchical idea into that, which is a more comprehensive way of thinking about it. Human beings struggle with themselves, with the malevolence that's inside themselves, with the evil that they're capable of doing, with the spiritual and psychological warfare that goes on within them. And we're also actually always at odds with nature. And this never seems to show up in Marx.
It wasn't really a good joke, actually.
In general.
That was not worth the payoff.
The primary conflict, as far as I'm concerned, or a primary conflict that human beings engage in, is this struggle for life in a cruel and harsh natural world. And it's as if all
right, humans struggle for life in a hard and cruel natural world. We haven't, as you pointed out, come to point 2 yet. Yes. We left point 1 in the dust.
Also, he was saying a moment ago that Marx wasn't pessimistic enough. And now he's saying that it's a cruel world. We come into the world starving and freezing, and it's just like, hang on a second.
Right. We need to be more pessimistic than that.
Yes.
All right, we have exactly 1 minute left. Oh.
That doesn't exist in the Marxist domain. If human beings have a problem, it's because there's a class struggle that's essentially economic. It's like, no, human beings have problems because we come into life starving and lonesome. And we have to solve that problem continually, and we make our social arrangements, at least in part, to ameliorate that, as well as to, well, upon occasion, exacerbate it. And so there's also very little understanding in the Communist Manifesto that any of the, like, say, hierarchical organizations that human beings have put together might have a positive element. And that's an absolute catastrophe, because hierarchical structures are actually...
Are you strawmanning the Communist Manifesto again by saying it doesn't think that there are any beneficial hierarchies? Which I don't think you can, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he even brings it up later on. He says that Marx praised capitalism for the advances that it had made.
Right.
And also, as I kind of pointed out in my video, you don't pause a critique of capitalism, especially one that's only a manifesto, to say, but here are the things that I think are great about hierarchies or about capitalism, typically, unless it's, got a point.
We certainly have had none of those in almost 10 minutes, so we've got like 20 seconds left.
necessary to solve complicated social problems. We have to organize ourselves in some manner, and you have to give the devil his due. And so it is the case that hierarchies dispossess people, and that's a big problem. That's the fundamental problem of inequality. But it's also the case that hierarchies happen to be a very efficient way of distributing resources. And it's finally the case that human hierarchies are not fundamentally predicated on power.
Well, that's an interesting statement to end on.
Yeah, it's a convenient thing to believe if you happen to have a lot of money and,
Yeah, power.
yeah, if you really happen to have a lot of power. It's very convenient.
Yes. My screen is being odd again. I don't know why it does this. I find this very annoying.
Yes, we're currently zoomed in on Kermit's hands.
It's very exciting, isn't it? All right, what the hell is going on? See, now Kevin would be yelling at me. He's going, Withers, what the hell are you doing? And he's like, I don't know.
It's okay. I'm a boomer as well. I'm just in the body of a millennial. It's yeah.
So hold on a second. Let me get a grip of what the heck is going on here. I think this must be something on the computer that it's.
Don't rise.
Hold on.
Yeah. Kevin. Kevin said to me that he just pokes things and hopes that they that it all goes right. Yeah, and that's kind of what I do as well. So don't worry.
Good. All right. So this is at least manageable now. I don't know what I did. I took the mouse. I don't even know where the mouse is at this point anymore. There it is. Okay. So having done that now, I think I will manually, rather than using my remote screen, scrub forward. I don't think we can handle 10 minutes of Žižek. So can you count up how many points we think Peterson, like an estimate? We're not trying to be perfect here, but like a fair amount of for the points Peterson made. What did we get to?
I mean, I had about 4 or 5, depending on what you count as a point.
Okay.
And I was at the end of 10 minutes, which wasn't great. Considering, I mean, this is, again, I don't want to put anybody off debating. If you're a new speaker or somebody who's only been doing it for like a year, then a point every 2 minutes isn't all that bad. I mean, it's pretty slow, but it's not all that bad. But for somebody on Jordan Peterson's level, considering this is like a Clash of the Titans thing, I'd expect him to be a bit quicker.
Yes. When I was saying points, it wasn't so much like I think he gets a point, so much as he said something that could be an argument, maybe, if we wait and see.
Yes.
So that was what I meant by point.
It's between the thinking about thinking.
Yes.
You know, the ironic thing is that you and I are separating the wheat from the chaff. That is precisely what we're doing.
We're looking at every sentence and pulling it apart.
Yeah. I did want to I didn't have time. I think I cut this out of the video actually, but he says that nature doesn't exist in Marxism. He says it's almost like nature doesn't exist. I just wanted to point out that isn't true. That just isn't true. In Marxism, you've got this idea of the metabolic rift between man and nature, how we're sort of alienated from our labor, but also alienated from nature itself as a sort of consequence of that. And right. If you'd read the economic and philosophical, what was it called? Economic and Philosophical Manual of 1884, 1844. He might have some idea of that, but it just shows that he hasn't read the range. And also to talk about absolutes, as in he never talks about when you've only read one of his books, is probably a little bit, that's a bad move.
All right, good to know. All right, and instead of doing, here's what I'm going to say. Now, this might be introducing a bit of bias into this, because it is getting to be about an hour, and these guys are heavy going. So here's what I propose, rather than like doing 10 minutes of Žižek, which would be nightmarish, or even 5 minutes. Let's go through and let's see if we can, how long it takes Žižek to get to 4 points.
Yeah.
Does that seem fair?
I mean, I don't think we'll have to wait long. Dense stuff.
Yes, it is.
He's the porridge to Peterson's smash, isn't he?
Yes. instead of being like, very watery, he's very thick, like a concrete malt shake from, a Dairy Queen or something. All right. So I think I've got the beginning pretty much. He's just sat down here, and I assume he'll have some opening. We're not going to do timed because we can't get through that much Žižek, so I'll just hit play.
A brief introductory remark. I cannot but notice the irony of how Peterson and I, the participants in this duel of the century, are both marginalized by the official academic community. I'm supposed to defend here the left liberal line against neoconservatives. Really? Most of the attacks on me are now precisely from left liberals. Just remember the outcry against my critique of LGBT plus ideology. And I'm sure that if the leading figures in this field were to be asked if I am fit to stand for them, they would turn in their graves even if they are still alive.
Yeah, Žižek holds shitty views. I'm not here to defend Žižek. I should have said that at the beginning, but I'll say it now, late but I guess appropriate at the start of his thing. Yeah, I don't sign off on Žižek, but this was billed as a debate of the current year, so we're watching it.
So let me begin by bringing together the three notions from the title: happiness, communism, capitalism.
Oh my goodness, already.
Exactly.
I mean, he doesn't, but at least he tried.
Yeah, and he brought them up, and often that's enough to trick a judge. If you're going into a debate, often just repeating it back to them is it's probably similar when you're reading academic works. Even if they don't deal with the point, at least they said they were going to deal with the point.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mentioned it in my abstract, in my introduction, and my conclusion.
Yes.
I didn't talk about it during the body of the work, but I mentioned it those other times.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
In one exemplary case, China today. China in the last decades is arguably the greatest economic success story in human history.
All right, so just that point, he's going to now switch and try to synthesize these concepts, and he's linking it to China. So we'll see where he goes.
Hundreds of millions raised from poverty into middle-class existence. How did China achieve it? The 20th century left was defined by its opposition to the two fundamental tendencies of modernity: the reign of capital with its aggressive market competition, the authoritarian bureaucratic state power.
All right, so now he's linking this to left criticism of capitalism and authoritarian state power, right? So he's setting that up. China, their situation, how did they make this change? Left critique, these two principles.
Today's China combines these two features in its extreme form: strong authoritarian state, wild capitalist dynamics. And it's important to note, they do it on behalf of happiness of the majority of people. They don't mention communism to legitimize their rule. They prefer the old Confucian notion of a harmonious society.
Right, so he's linking harmonious society to happiness, which is a slide.
Yeah, I'd also, I'm probably being a bit too critical of him here, but I'd also say that a lot of those, a lot of what he said so far could also be said of the antithesis to communism in the form of fascism. Fascism, again, was in some ways very modern, but in other ways very opposed to modernity in its doctrine, if not in reality. But then, yeah.
Right. All right, but that was a pretty complicated series of ideas to communicate in that amount of time. So I think when compared to listening to Peterson, you have to really slow down with Žižek. I do anyway, and have to think about what he's putting together, because things connect across sentences, across paragraphs for him.
Yeah, I had to pause it after he said, "How did China achieve this?" Because I listened past that, and then I went, "Okay, I'm going to have to pause it and go back to how did China achieve this?" And then I realized, like, okay, that's the point he's making, and then.
Yep, yeah, exactly. You have to put together things he's set up with things he's saying now and look at where he's going all at the same time. with Žižek.
But are the Chinese any happier for all that? Although even the Dalai Lama justifies Tibetan Buddhism in Western terms of the pursuit of happiness and the avoidance of pain, happiness as a goal of our life is a very problematic notion.
All right, so this is interesting, at least for me, from a writing point of view, that he went to China and discussed that, and then, of course, he transitions to the Dalai Lama and that perspective on happiness, and he uses that to set up a questioning of what even happiness is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit biased because I'm a Kantian, so I immediately think of the struggle between deontological views and teleological views of ethics. That's where my mind goes. So I liked hearing that, but I don't know that I, necessarily agree with where he takes it.
Right. But in terms of the craft of not only linking together the ideas here, but I also, maybe I'm giving him too much credit for like using the Dalai Lama when he could have chosen Buddha, but using that cultural sidestep to get into a different part of his points about happiness, which, so that's nicely done. I think deftly done.
Yeah, and it's wound together culturally as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was there to be used, and he used it. Also, I've been listening to a lot of hip hop lately, so I'm looking for bars. Maybe I probably shouldn't be looking at Žižek for bars. Maybe I'm just primed to see those kinds of connections. Okay.
If we learned anything from psychoanalysis, it is that we humans are very creative in sabotaging our pursuit of happiness. Happiness is a confused notion. Basically, it relies on the subject's inability or unreadiness to fully confront the consequences of their desire.
One thing, I don't know if he comes back to it, but like the point of China was to say that the things that the West were criticizing are the things that actually made China's economic situation much better. But then he I don't feel like he did anything with that. But sorry, I'm probably getting too much into Žižek's thought here. But yeah, I'm actually going to stop and just listen to him. Sorry, it's hard to. But by the way, how many points are you currently on? Or yeah.
I mean, he's beaten Peterson by this point. But I know, low bar. But his ignorance is bliss style argument that he's currently doing, I think that's the one he spends the longest on from my previous analysis.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, maybe we'll dip our toes in a little bit longer into some Žižek just to get an idea of the scaffold he builds with his sentences and his ideas and the landing places. Just again, kind of do a better comparison with the extemporaneous style of Jordan B. Peterson.
In our daily lives, we pretend to desire things which we do not really desire. So that ultimately, the worst thing that can happen is for us to get what we officially desire. So
sorry, that's Žižek for me. Him explaining these kinds of things is, for me, it's very Žižek. His take. Yeah, I don't always agree with it, but no, please, it's fine. I don't always agree with it, but I always appreciate like the way he gets to ideas in ways that I haven't thought of before.
Yeah, he. I also wonder if that's a reference to something, because I mean, maybe it was just getting into an area of philosophy that I'm not familiar with, but that sounded like it might have been a reference to something, a reference to what we desire happening can be the worst thing for us.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like Schopenhauer or something into that area or not, but yeah, it's but again, very nicely done in terms of like the irony of the phrase as a rhetorical device. So
I agree that human life of freedom and dignity does not consist just in searching for happiness, no matter how much we spiritualize it, or in the effort to actualize our inner potentials. We have to find some meaningful cause beyond the mere struggle for pleasurable survival. However, I would like to add here a couple of qualifications. First, since we live in a modern era We cannot simply refer to an unquestionable authority to confer a mission or task on us. Modernity means that, yes, we should carry the burden. But the main burden is freedom itself. We are responsible for our burdens. Not only are we not allowed cheap excuses for not doing our duty, duty itself should not serve as an excuse. We are never just instruments of some higher cause. Once traditional authority loses its substantial power, it is not possible to return to it. All such returns are today a postmodern fake. Does Donald Trump stand for traditional values? No. His conservatism is a postmodern performance, a gigantic ego trip. In this sense of
So that's actually a really interesting way to think about Trump's politics as a postmodern sort of performance art of conservatism, because it is the case. He's surrounded himself with evangelical pastors who are giving him a pass on everything. And he's being, protected by a party that under Reagan, they claim to have defeated the Soviet Union, and now they're covering up for his collaborations with the Russians. So, I mean,
this is true, but I also wonder if it's a little bit of a misuse of the word postmodernism, or if at least people who identify with postmodern philosophy would probably object to it being used in that way.
I think that's probably a pretty good point. You have to ask Žižek, but I think, I think that's fair enough. I'm at this point, I guess we can do a few more seconds, but I think we've seen the difference between.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I thought to myself, when he got to the bit about just after pleasurable sound, I thought he's already made double the points that Peterson made in the 10 minutes of Peterson that we watched, and he's been going for what,
2 minutes maybe. I mean, he's at 20. It's 43:14. I'll just back it up to kind of when he gets into his seat. Is that about it? Okay, that's Peterson already. Žižek. Yeah, within 3 minutes.
Yeah, and there was also that sort of 20 seconds where he's building up, talking about the LGBT community and LGBT ideology.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was, pretty much what I kind of thought it would be. In fact, I'm really glad that we made the decision to just say, let's see how long it takes to have Žižek defeat Peterson, because 3 minutes and it was already pretty heavy stuff, and we hadn't gotten to,
we could have been there hours. We could have been here for hours.
It could have been Jeff Holiday show in length. It could have been a 4-hour stream, but
oh my god, yeah. No, I'd rather, I'd rather not analyze all of Žižek again.
Fair enough. But if you imagine the transcript of this, I mean, and of course, Žižek is reading from a piece of prepared paper because he thought about this before he came on stage.
Yeah. To give you an idea, I analysed the whole of Peterson's opening speech, the full 25 minutes of it, and that took me to 2 sides of A4. And the first 10 minutes of Žižek, which I did today, sort of in preparation for this, that's 2 sides of A4 as well. Yeah, it's a statement.
Are you going to do a Žižek video since you've done all this work?
No, I don't think I will. I think it'd get so deep into philosophy, because I've got some notes on the side, sort of when he's saying about totalitarianism and being instruments of a higher cause, and how bringing in Dostoevsky. I'm wondering if he's sort of channeling Hannah Arendt's definition of totalitarianism. Mm-hmm. That our will is essentially eroded. The aim of totalitarianism is essentially to erode our will so that we cannot think as individuals. And so I think I would get so bogged down in the philosophy that it just wouldn't be a video worth making. It'd be a 9-hour video, and it
would be a lecture series.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't half wonder if he very deliberately brought in the Dostoevsky refutation, knowing Peterson's love for Dostoevsky. So I just kind of thought it was
But I also thought you mentioned that neither of these two are the next Christopher Hitchens, and there's something to be said for that, because Žižek has clearly like written this piece out before he's come along, and he's clearly like tailored certain bits of it, like the only something like religion can make good people do bad things. He's playing to an audience of old Hitchensite types, you know. And I say this as somebody who used to kind of hold Hitchens in high esteem. I mean, I still admire his speaking style, but I just think his
I'm right there. No, I'm right there with you.
yeah. I used to love listening to Christopher Hitchens, and it was actually how I got into debating. But you sort of grow past that, I guess, to some degree, or maybe you don't. But that was the other problem with Žižek. If you're going into a debate, you might be really, really clever, and you might have all this brilliant knowledge. But at the end of the day, if you don't get your point across to the audience that you're trying to, or if you don't look like you're connecting with the other person and knocking down their points, you're not going to get anywhere. And Žižek, I mean, I don't want to be too critical of him, but I think he probably overestimated the audience he was listening to in Peterson's fans.
Oh, definitely. I mean, his audience and their applause lines, I think there was only half of the auditorium applauding, not only because the people were agreeing with Žižek or thought he made a good point, but because they understood him.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Oh, I understood that bit. I'm going to clap now. Yeah. I think that was probably a lot of what was going on. But yeah, I feel like the Peterson fans, though. I mean, Jordan Peterson himself. I don't know if you've seen the footage, but Jordan Peterson himself. Sorry, I know you've seen the footage. What I mean is, I don't know if you paid attention to that bit where the camera turns. Jordan Peterson himself. He's sitting there, and you can see he's trying his best not to look completely stumped, because before he was like making notes on his ad thing that he's got, but now he's just sitting there going, "Oh no!"
when they threw the questions over to Peterson, and he said something along the lines of, "I had 3 questions, and 2 of them now are completely irrelevant." I was like, "You didn't prepare for this at all, did you? You really have no idea what you're up against." And I loved it when Žižek referred to Peterson's description as a simplified Marx, or a simplified version of Marx. I think he was being very generous at that point.
Yeah.
But, neither of them really got to, well, one, they didn't have a clear point. Neither of them did. I had a clear thesis that they started with and ended with, and sort of took the audience on a journey along with them, and made a case. Even if they would, it wasn't like a yes-no thing, just to convey what it is they think about happiness, communism, and capitalism on some level. But neither of them did that in their statements at all. And from the conversation that's going back and forth, it's mostly Peterson going, "Well, I thought Marxists thought this, and I thought Marxists thought that." But I'm simplifying it slightly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be accused of viewing the history of this primarily through an economic lens or anything, but also these guys, they make their money from being ambiguous. Both of them really do. Like there's ambiguity with substance. There's the porridge, there's sort of, it's hard to follow, but there's a lot there. And then there's ambiguity in the mashed potato. There's nothing there. Yeah.
There's the Broadway parts and the other ridiculousness of Peterson.
Yes. Yeah, Kermit. Yes.
This has been so much fun. Thank you for doing this experiment, recreational social science here. Like I said, nothing here should be taken as a peer-reviewed or in any way authorized exercise of academic authority.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on, because I've really enjoyed this. It's been a real laugh to have someone to analyze, to laugh at Peterson's thoughts about thinking with.
Yes. Well, maybe if the audience like this a lot, we can do like a quarterly bit where we get some Peterson on and just have a go at him just tear him down for a bit. I'd be up for that.
Yes. Yeah.
Where can people find you on YouTube and on Twitter?
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear the first part of that.
Oh, sure. Where can people find you on YouTube and on Twitter?
Oh, on YouTube, I'm under TCS, the Cognitive Society, and I'm also occasionally on Kev's channel. Being an invader there. And on Twitter, I am at Cognitive Sock, I think. Sock as in SOC, not SOCK. Yeah.
And sorry, I think my mic, when I pulled it forward last time, it detached. Hopefully I wasn't on mic this whole time. But yes, so go and check out Cog's channel. You can check him out on Twitter. And if you liked this, say so in the comments or tell us on Twitter, and maybe we can do it again sometime. Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess goodbye from me and goodbye from Cog. Cog, if you want to hang around a little bit, I'll see you in the after show party bit. So
the after party. Oh, great.
Yeah, so goodbye from me and goodbye from Cog. Say goodbye, Cog.
See you soon.
You didn't do the bit.
We got to do the no pass around. I didn't even know that you did that.
Well, Kevin does that on his fascism show. There's so many bits now, it's hard to keep up.
Yeah, okay. We'll do the no pass around. Wait, are you referring to that first one? Because I missed it the first time I did it with Kev. I also missed it, and he was like, "You didn't do the bit. You got to do the bit, Cog." Yeah.
I'm sorry, there are too many bits. Do the no pass around one.
Yes, we'll do the So no pass around.
See you guys. Bye.